Ag PhD full episodes and more are now available on Acres TV, the newest ag platform connecting you to fields of information. Look for us on watchacrestv.com.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk about one of the key questions we get from farmers. Farmers will call us up and say, I'm not sure if my weed is going to die. I sprayed it, but is it going to be dead? Is it dead now?
Well, I've got the answer for you, Brian. If you just switch all your applications over to Gramoxone, you're gonna know pretty quickly either the weed is dead or it's not, because that one works fast. But so many of these herbicides take a little time to kill the weed.
Yep.
And it's been really frustrating for farmers if they spray something like 2,4-D or dicamba, for example. It might be a couple of weeks before you really know for sure, is that weed going to completely die or not?
So back about, I don't know what it's been, 40 years ago or something like that, when products like Post and Clefidum or Select came out, they're grass killers. And our dad would talk about how they were so slow, he'd literally put a stick in the field to see if the weed was still growing, if that volunteer corn was still growing or the grass was still growing. He'd mark the stick, come back a week later, oh, the weed isn't any bigger, it's dead. Well, there's a little bit simpler way to do this. So what we will do with plants like, for example, volunteer corn, we will pull the center out, we'll pull the whorl out, and what we're looking for inside is it brown or black inside? If it is, hey, we've killed the growing point, now we feel great.
You know, the other thing that you can do in broadleaf plants, you can dig them up, you can take a look at the root system, you can split open the stem, you can see if it's brown on the inside of the stem, those types of things. But here's the other thing to watch for. Let's just take a broadleaf weed, for example. Say you spray a herbicide on the top, you come back a week later and you say, man, it's not completely brown and disintegrated out there, which is not surprising. But if you see any regrowth at all coming from the lower parts of that plant, you know, oh no, I didn't have enough active ingredient to deliver a lethal dose to every one of those growing points. Now the plant's gonna start again. Now it's a whole different question of, is that plant going to still hurt my yield? Is that still going to make seed? Those are different questions, but is that plant gonna be alive? If you see new growth coming out of it, yeah, you didn't get it killed.
Okay, so we've just talked about two totally different things. Let me review. With grass plants, they have one growing point. If we kill that one growing point, if you see that growing point is brown, black, whatever, it looks decayed in any way, odds are you have killed that plant. With annual broadleaf plants, their growing points are going to be above ground, typically, and they're going to have mini growing points. You have to kill every single growing point. The most active growing points are almost always at the top, so usually herbicides will work their way down. They'll go from top down to the bottom. So you might see, oh, the top growing points look completely dead, but down at the bottom, like Darren's saying, if there's any new growth that gets started, you did not completely kill that plant.
And this is why we want to kill weeds when they're really small. Like with grass, as Brian mentioned, one growing point, but if it starts to tiller out, now you've got additional growing points and it's going to be that much more difficult to control. Also, it's kind of bushy, so it's hard to get good coverage on that whole weed. And with broadleaf weeds, they have less growing points if they're smaller, they have more growing points as they get bigger. So it's a pretty clear thing. If you want to kill the growing points, do it when there's less of them.
The other thing here is, if we're talking about perennial weeds, they can have growing points down below the ground. So if we're looking at that, or if, let's say, it is an annual broadleaf plant that is getting kind of big, you've got to go with a good, strong herbicide rate. That's usually the problem that we see, is people use the right product, they sprayed it maybe even in some cases at the right time, they just didn't use a high enough rate, so they got a lethal dose to every single growing point. That's what you have to have if you want complete weed control.
When you're spraying weeds, you want to get a complete kill. If it's our Weed of the Week, we'll show you how to accomplish that coming up later in the show.